Hello, I'm Star Kashara from The Face of Diet, and today I want to talk to you about sugar. We all know that sugar isn't good for us, but the problem is the baby is getting thrown out with the bathwater. People are now demonizing natural, healthy foods that contain natural sugars as being bad foods because they're high in sugar. So let's smash some myths. Okay, so the government limits for how much sugar we can have a day is 30 grams. That's in the UK where I live. But that only applies to added sugars, not total carbohydrate content in your food. It would be impossible to stick to only 30 grams unless you literally never ate a fruit or vegetable ever again. And one of the leading causes of death and disease from diet-related causes is lack of fruits and vegetables. Unfortunately, there is a lot of misinformation around sugar in all its forms, so let's cut to the science. Okay, so there are two main ways you get sugar in your diet. One, via intrinsic sugars, and two, extrinsic sugars. Those are the only two things you need to worry about. And you could also term these as good sugars and bad sugars. What we're essentially looking at is where the sugar came from. So an extrinsic sugar, or a bad sugar, is one that's been extracted from the original food source. So it doesn't matter what name you give this sugar, whether it's glucose or sucrose or fructose, if it's been extracted, for example, it is a powdered sugar or it is a syrup, then you can guarantee that you're working with an extrinsic sugar. You could, if you wanted to be really super black and white about this, label that a bad sugar. Then we have the intrinsic sugars, and these are natural carbohydrates present in natural foods. You'll find most intrinsic sugars inside fruits and vegetables. So just by knowing that, we should also understand that intrinsic sugars are not bad sugars. These are in fruits and vegetables, the very foods that we know to be absolutely essential to our health and well-being. We don't eat enough fruits and vegetables in this country, or in any Western country it seems. But we do see a lot of misinformation and even disinformation on the internet about avoiding fruit because it's high in sugar. Well, let's smash that myth again, because one, we've just shown that there's nothing wrong with intrinsic sugars. There's actually zero science that tells us that we shouldn't eat fruits and vegetables. In fact, the science says the complete opposite. The only rule in regard to sugar was about added sugars. There is literally no limit unless you have a doctor that's told you because you have a certain disease. But for the general populace, when we're looking at generalized dietary rules, there's literally no limit on eating fruits and vegetables and the natural carbohydrates that come from those sources. Also, fruit isn't as high in sugar as you might think. For one thing, fruit covers an enormous variety of foods. Everything from berries to avocados, for example. A zucchini is a fruit as well, as is a butternut squash, as well as, the things like oranges and pineapples, which are also fruits. Fruits have varying levels of carbohydrate content, and almost all fruits, even the ones we think of as being sweet, sugary fruits, tend to be low to medium on the glycemic index and low on glycemic load as well. Fruit has never really been fully scientifically categorized as a high sugar food, ever. This has come about through people who don't understand nutrition and are blogging about it on the internet. We really need better sources of information. And also, it doesn't help that on our government guidelines say don't eat more than 30 grams of added sugars a day. But when it comes to looking at labels, when you're out in the world as a normal human being, doing your shopping and looking at labels, there isn't a distinction on the nutrition label between added sugars and intrinsic sugars. So when you buy something that's quite healthy and natural, like a freshly made granola that's got no added sugar, and it says the sugar content might be 10 grams per portion, you might think, oh my goodness, that's 30% of my of the limit. No, it isn't, because that's only intrinsic sugars and the limit's for extrinsic added sugars. But the label doesn't tell you, it just says sugar. So you've got no idea, which sugars are from what, and it's very hard to even put any of these rules into place without that knowledge. So we need a kind of changing labelling law. But unfortunately, these things tend to work very slowly. So I'm just going to say to you this really easy rule to follow. If it's a whole fruit or vegetable, or even a dried fruit or vegetable, it's a healthy sugar. End of story. You do not need to worry about how much sugar is in a fruit or vegetable. Like I said, unless you are someone that actually has to be careful of that thing because of a medical or clinical condition. So for the general populace, it's not an issue at all in any way, shape or form. In fact, you'll often find that cooked vegetables are usually higher on the glycemic index than fruit, which is really bizarre when you hear about some of the rules people get told at some of these diet groups that people attend, and they're told that don't have a fruit smoothie because it's high in sugar, but it's okay to have a vegetable soup, which essentially is a vegetable smoothie. And yet the vegetable soup will be higher in glucose than the actual smoothie. So there's an awful lot of misinformation coming about, and it's presented as fact when often it actually isn't. So, good sugars versus bad sugars. If it's a fruit or vegetable, it will never in a million years ever be a bad sugar. Just eat as much of that as you want. Not only does fruit and vegetable have the healthy carbohydrates that our body needs, remember that your brain literally runs on glucose. If you don't get it from fruits and vegetables, your body will make you get it from somewhere else. And if you're sat there saying, well, I'm on a ketogenic diet and my brain runs on ketones, well, there aren't that many people that have been able to do keto for very, very long term. Do you know why? Because eventually they'll go and binge on a load of glucose, and it'll be the worst kind. It'll be donuts, it'll be cake, it'll be chocolate. Pretty much everyone I know who's been on any kind of restrictive low carb diet has binged secretly on all the worst carbs. So they're ignoring the fruit because that's bad, but they're eating the worst kind of extrinsic sugars, the bad sugars, when they have a binge because they've been starving their brain of glucose. Your brain runs on sugar. Every cell in your body runs on sugar. You choose, are you going to get that sugar from healthy intrinsic sources like fruits and vegetables, or are you going to get it from unhealthy extrinsic sources like added sugars and cakes and pastries and candies? The other thing is, if we are going to argue and say that humans shouldn't eat sugar, then that will be like saying babies shouldn't breastfeed, because breast milk is also very sweet. It contains a natural sugar called lactose, which is also in most mammalian milks to varying degrees, because again, we're building a healthy brain. The brain needs fat and it needs sugar to grow. So, if we're not meant to eat sugar, then, nature put it in breast milk. Are we now going to say that people shouldn't breastfeed because, oh my goodness, you're feeding your baby sugar? It doesn't make sense, does it? And therefore, it doesn't make sense to say don't eat fruit, don't eat vegetables because it contains sugar. When we demonize a healthy food group based on one of its macronutrients, which is actually an essential nutrient, then we really aren't being scientific. We're just making an opinion based on someone else's opinion on the internet. And we really need to kind of dig deep and make sure that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So yes, by all means, avoid as much extrinsic added sugars as you want, but please eat your fruits and vegetables. That is also where the beauty nutrients are as well. So if you cut out all the sugar of your diet, you're also going to cut out the antioxidants, you're going to cut out most of your vitamins, and you might not like the way you look in a few months' time. Anyway, I hope that's been helpful. I would love to get your comments below, and let's discuss it further. See you soon.